Certainly. Here's an expanded Chapter 1 of your HFY sci-fi story, extended to approximately 500 words in first-person, immersive narration. We thought we were the apex. 19 species strong. The Galactic Concord, a beacon of unity, peace, and mutual annihilation held in check by bureaucracy and thinly veiled distrust. I served that machine for 37 cycles. Earned my stars through obedience, not insight. I believed the Concord was unshakable, until the day the unknown ship arrived. The first alert came from the outer rim. A ghost ping. No warp trail. No comms. Just a distortion near the ghost nebula that refused to resolve. I was stationed aboard the VSS Trinari, leading a patrol wing when the order came down: investigate and neutralize if necessary. It wasn't protocol to respond with force, but someone high up was nervous. They sent the whole damn fleet. 200 ships. Carriers, dreadnoughts, cloaked scouts from the Nethari clade. A show of force, not a declaration of war. That's what they told us. We dropped into the coordinates in perfect formation. And then we saw it. A single ship. No escort. No hull signature. No registration. It hovered there in the void, motionless. Its surface absorbed light, so dark it hurt to look at. It didn't pulse or hum or signal. It simply was. The kind of silence that screams. Admiral Korov ordered a scan. Every sensor lit up, then died. Systems rebooted. Rebooted again. The ship interfered with everything, like it was rewriting the laws around it. And then it moved. It didn't accelerate. It didn't ignite engines. It just shifted. One frame it was still, the next it had relocated hundreds of kilometers closer. No inertia wake. No gravitational ripple. The kind of movement that shouldn't be possible for a physical object. That's when it spoke. Not through the comms. Not through sound. Straight into my mind. You are in violation of Terran quarantine protocols. This zone is restricted. Leave now or be removed. I felt every word behind my eyes. My thoughts weren't my own in that moment. I knew that voice. It didn't just speak, it measured me. Judged me. Terran. That word hadn't meant anything in centuries. A failed species. A casualty of its own violent rise. Humanity had never joined the Concord. Never responded to envoys. Eventually, we wrote them off. Thought they'd collapsed in civil wars and cannibalized their own world. We were wrong. Admiral Korov didn't hesitate. He ordered a full strike. Plasma lances, graviton torpedoes, null-time missiles. A wall of fire meant to level continents. It never hit. The Terran ship pulsed once. No flash, no blast, just a soft shimmer like a heat mirage, and then everything stopped. The fleet was gone. Not destroyed. Not in pieces. Gone. Only my ship remained. Systems dead. Crew unconscious or worse. And me, alone on the bridge, staring at the void. The ship turned toward me. No engines. No visible movement. Just certainty. And then another voice in my mind. We remember everything. Then it disappeared. No flash. No jump. Just absence. And for the first time in my career, I felt something I had never known. We were not the apex. We were prey. Of course. Here's Chapter 2, expanded to approximately 500 words, continuing the immersive first-person HFY narrative without headings. They pulled me from the wreckage 6 days later. The VSS Trinari had drifted past the outer rim, adrift on backup power and failing life support. Most of the crew was dead. Those who weren't had gone catatonic, minds crushed under the psychic weight of whatever that ship did to us. I was the only one left who could speak. And I almost wish I couldn't. They rushed me to a secure med station in the Kevari spiral, pumped me full of stabilizers, ran neural pattern scans, interrogated my memories like I was a suspect instead of a survivor. But it wasn't medical treatment. It was containment. Political quarantine. I wasn't there to heal. I was there to be silenced. I gave them the same story again and again. A single Terran warship. No weapons detected. No warning. No survivors. 200 Concord ships erased in under 4 minutes without a trace. They asked the same questions over and over, each time phrased differently, searching for cracks in my sanity, like they were praying I'd contradict myself just once so they could write it off as trauma-induced hallucination. I never did. One interrogator finally dropped the mask. She leaned in, no recorder, no rank insignia, and said, "You don't understand, Commander. If what you're saying is true, the Concord is already dead. Do you know what that would mean?" "Yes." I knew exactly what it meant. They stopped questioning me after that. I was transferred to an isolation cell aboard a black site facility orbiting an uninhabited moon. No windows. No news. Just blank walls and stale air. I spent 3 days in silence, waiting for the tribunal or the execution I knew was coming. Concord leadership couldn't afford to let my story get out. They needed a scapegoat, a failure, a cautionary tale. A dead man couldn't cause panic. But I wasn't dead yet. On the 4th day, the screen in my cell flickered to life. Not a feed from the outside. Not surveillance. Something else. Static first. Then a flicker. Then a direct visual stream. Not from Concord space. Of it. The Terran ship. It hung there above a Concord station like a shadow stitched into space. The video showed targeting overlays, not from our tech, something far more precise. Alien inefficiency. Hundreds of Concord vessels were locked in, their threat levels calculated down to decimal points. Then, nothing. Just a pulse. And gone. I stared at the black screen long after the footage ended. The message was clear. They wanted me to know. To remember. That night, the walls hummed. Lights dimmed. A voice, hers, cut through the silence of my cell, not in my mind this time, but through real sound. "You're not done yet." The door slid open without a sound. 2 guards waited. Black armor. No insignia. They didn't say where they were taking me. They didn't need to. I already knew. The Terrans weren't finished. And neither was I. Absolutely. Here's Chapter 3, expanded to approximately 500 words, continuing the intense first-person HFY narrative without headings. The corridor outside my cell was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear footsteps, ventilation, humming lights, or distant voices. Just silence, like the walls were absorbing sound. The 2 guards didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me, just marched forward in perfect synchronization. Their armor didn't reflect light, and their visors were black. Not Concord issue. The hallway was unfamiliar. It wasn't part of any station I knew. No signage, no directional markings, no security panels. Seamless steel. Organic, almost. I tried to memorize the path, count steps, track turns, but that quickly became useless. I was being led in circles, or through artificial loops. Nothing repeated, yet nothing changed. Time lost meaning. We stopped at a door that wasn't a door. The wall simply folded open. Inside was a vast chamber, spherical, lit by a pulsing core of white gold light at its center. Holograms hovered all around it. Systems, languages, trajectories I didn't recognize. Concord tech wasn't this clean, this quiet. Everything here moved with purpose, but no visible operator controlled it. And then I saw her. The woman from the ship. She stood across the room, hands clasped behind her back, dressed in a uniform that shimmered between form and shadow. Human. Definitely. But older than she looked. Not in years, but in history. There was a depth in her eyes I couldn't place, like she had lived 1,000 lives and remembered every one. "You've been watched," she said, stepping toward me. Her voice echoed not off the walls, but inside my bones. "You should have killed me," I replied, not out of defiance, but resignation. "You erased 200 ships. Why let one witness walk away?" "We don't erase," she corrected. "We correct." I stared at her. That was correction. It was mercy. She gestured toward the hovering images. I saw the Concord fleet again, flashing icons, ranks, signal trails. Then overlays of planetary colonies, industrial worlds, cultural centers. The more I looked, the more I realized, it wasn't just our military they were analyzing. It was us. Our flaws, our fears, our history of suppression masked as diplomacy. "You think we're tyrants," I said. I think you're stagnant, she replied. Afraid of progress. Proud of survival. But survival isn't evolution. It's delay. My hands clenched at my sides. So what? You come back after 2 centuries and start issuing ultimatums. She didn't flinch. We didn't return to give orders. We returned to restore balance. By threatening genocide? She looked at me then, truly looked. If we wanted genocide, Commander Jhaen, no one would be left to question it. She stepped closer. I didn't move. You were spared because you listen. Because you still question. I swallowed. What do you want from me? Her reply was simple. Truth. Your voice. Your presence. The Concord will deny what's coming. They'll cling to illusion. You will be the fracture line. A living contradiction. I realized then, I wasn't a survivor. I was a signal. And the war hadn't started because the Terrans were angry. It had started because they were finished waiting. Here is Chapter 4, expanded to approximately 500 words, continuing the immersive first-person HFY narrative with consistent tone and style, as requested. They called it a choice, but I knew better. When the Terran Imperium offers you something, it isn't a door you walk through. It's a path you were already on, and they're just letting you know. Still, I said yes. What else could I say? The world around me folded. There's no better word for it. One moment I was in that chamber of pulsing light and silent judgment, and the next, I stood on the edge of something impossible. A platform of seamless black metal hanging in open space. No walls, no railings. Just void. And yet I could breathe. Above me stretched stars I didn't recognize. Constellations twisted in impossible ways, bending with the curves of warped gravity. Below, a sphere shimmered. It wasn't a planet, not in any traditional sense. It was a data structure the size of a moon. I saw time moving inside it. Glimpses. Echoes. History rendered in light. Then I heard her voice again. Not from behind me this time. From everywhere. We archived everything. I watched Earth appear within the sphere, its surface layered with timelines. War, peace, collapse, rise. Every Terran conflict. Every philosophical shift. Every broken treaty and rebuilt society. A species that had torn itself apart more times than history could count, and kept putting itself back together stronger. When we left the galactic stage, we weren't running, she continued. We were evolving. Images shifted, generational ships leaving Sol, entire armadas slipping between folds of space not mapped by Concord charts. I saw artificial worlds grown from code and steel. Civilizations grown in simulation, tested across millennia before even drawing breath in the real galaxy. You call it exile. We called it containment, she said. We knew what we were capable of. But the galaxy wasn't ready. The display shifted again. Concord archives. Declassified documents. Meetings held in shadow. Human innovation suppressed. Terran scientists silenced. Early advances sabotaged to maintain order. I felt sick. Not because it wasn't believable, but because it was. We always assumed the humans had self-destructed. But it had been us. We had cut their ascent short. We never forgot, she said. We never forgave. She appeared beside me then, hands clasped behind her back again, as if she'd always been standing there. I didn't flinch. You want revenge? I asked. No, she said. We want release. I didn't understand. Not yet. You've seen what we can do. You've seen what your Concord has done. Now we give you the opportunity to correct it. She turned to face me fully, eyes steady. You'll return to them. Tell them what you've seen. What you know. And when they laugh, when they threaten, when they scramble, don't stop them. Just stand there. And watch. Watch what? I asked, voice hollow. Her answer was soft. Final. Watch them learn what it means to be prey. The platform dissolved beneath me, and I fell, not into space, but into purpose. Here is Chapter 5, expanded to approximately 500 words, continuing your first-person HFY saga with intense pacing and cinematic detail. They didn't even ask where I'd been. When I reappeared, the official logs claimed I'd been recovered from a drifting escape pod near the fringes of the Othan Expanse. No one could explain how the pod had gotten there, especially one built with outdated Concord systems that hadn't been used in decades, but no one asked. Bureaucracy didn't care about logic, only paperwork. I was rushed to medical review, tagged as a returning survivor of the Trinari incident, and paraded through the lower halls of the Concord Fleet Command like some broken war trophy. People didn't meet my eyes. I couldn't tell if it was fear, reverence, or guilt. A few days later, I was sitting in front of High Admiral Havath. He studied me the way a scientist studies a dangerous chemical, curious, fascinated, but fully prepared to lock it away the second it stopped being useful. "You're lucky," he said without warmth. "You're going to be famous." They needed a hero. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd survived. They turned my report into a spectacle. Sanitized it. Trimmed away everything inconvenient. I was a symbol of unity, of resilience. A living distraction from the silence that had spread across the outer sectors. But I knew the truth. The Imperium had begun its next phase. It started slowly. Outposts went quiet. Long-range probes stopped reporting. Then colonies began experiencing systemic failures, power grids collapsing, AI networks going dark, terraforming engines stalling mid-cycle. No signs of attack. No debris. No casualties. Just silence. We blamed everything except what it really was. Rogue code. Sensor ghosts. Pirate sabotage. The words Terran Imperium didn't even make it into official reports. They were too dangerous. But I saw the pattern. I used my clearance to track communications across sectors. Systems that had once thrived had gone completely dark. No comms, no trade signals, no freight manifests. These weren't accidents. They were tests. Then came the message. Encrypted in a Concord black channel. No sender. No origin. Just a string of symbols, recognizable only to me. A code from the Imperium, one I'd been programmed, *engineered*, to recognize the moment I returned. 4 words. That's all it said. Stage 2 begins now. And just like that, I understood. They weren't erasing worlds. They were isolating them. Cutting the nerves from the brain. Disconnecting the body before they performed the surgery. And I was the scalpel. Not with weapons. Not with sabotage. With silence. With truth. With my presence. I began showing up on systems next in line for collapse. Not to warn. Not to intervene. Just to witness. I became a signal. A harbinger. They called me many things. Traitor, turncoat, ghost admiral. I didn't respond to any of them. Because the only name that mattered now was the one whispered in the dark corridors of failing colonies, just before the power died for the last time. Messenger. Here is Chapter 6, expanded to approximately 500 words, continuing your cinematic, first-person HFY narrative. I arrived at Avarice Prime under false orders. Fabricated clearance codes, perfect, indistinguishable from official Concord encryption, slid through their orbital checkpoints like a hot blade through soft flesh. The system didn't even blink. That was the first sign of how deeply compromised they were. Avarice wasn't just another core world. It was the beating heart of the Concord's naval strategy. Dockyards, command nodes, sensor networks stretched across 6 orbital rings. It was the place you built ships when you wanted to scare your enemies without firing a shot. And now, it was the next target. I walked through the spire halls of the fleet assembly like I belonged. No one stopped me. Not even Admiral Havath. He didn't question my sudden reappearance in his command wing. I think, deep down, he knew something was wrong, but couldn't bring himself to face it. I was the symbol they needed. The face of survival. And what better place for a survivor than the front row? The Senate chambers were filled with murmurs of panic dressed as confidence. Reports of silent colonies. Missing patrols. Entire sectors fading into dead space with no explanation. And above it all, the Terran ghost ship, rumored, denied, then rumored again. The Chancellor gave a speech. Rigid. Calculated. It was everything Concord leadership had become, proud of order, allergic to uncertainty. He said, "This is a moment for unity." He said, "We must not give in to fear." He said, "No single force can threaten the might of the Concord." That's when the lights died. The silence that followed was not confusion, it was recognition. Everyone in that chamber knew, in that exact moment, what was happening. The sky turned black. Emergency shutters struggled to close, but I reached the viewing pane first. I saw it. The Terran vessel didn't arrive with flare or sound. It just appeared. Hanging there like a mountain carved from shadow, no seams, no lights, no engines. Its presence crushed the space around it. Not physically, emotionally star. I could feel it in my bones. Every fleet defense system went active. Dozens of carriers scrambled from the rings. Hundreds of fighters launched. The Concord was reacting, but not thinking. They were afraid. I watched from the tactical room as weapons locked on. Plasma lances charged. Graph-pulse torpedoes rotated into firing positions. They were repeating the same mistake. I opened my mouth to speak, to stop them. But I didn't. Because I remembered what she said. Just stand there. And watch. The Concord fired. And the Terran ship responded. No shields. No weapons. Just a pulse. A ripple of force, not light. Not noise. Something deeper. A tremor in the laws of reality itself. The Concord fleet collapsed. It didn't explode. It didn't even fall. It just ended. 42 seconds. Every ship gone. The chamber behind me fell into chaos. Screams. Running. Demands for explanations, for countermeasures, for answers. But I already knew. This wasn't war. This was correction. Here is Chapter 7, expanded to approximately 500 words, concluding this arc of your first-person HFY narrative. They didn't land troops. They didn't seize the government. They didn't demand surrender. The Terrans simply left. One moment their ship hovered above Avarice Prime like a god's shadow, and the next it was gone. No aftershock. No debris. Just quiet. The kind that settles after the truth detonates in the soul of a people too proud to admit they'd lost everything. I stood in the shattered silence of the Concord command spire, listening to the panic ripple outward. Admirals barking orders to non-existent fleets. Senators demanding retribution from ruins. The Chancellor was nowhere to be found. Rumors said he'd suffered a neural collapse mid-broadcast. I didn't need confirmation. The Concord wasn't just broken. It was exposed. Across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and unstoppable. Whole fleets defected. Outer systems severed ties with Central Command. Autonomous colonies declared neutrality or swore loyalty to the Terran Imperium without a single shot fired. And why wouldn't they? They'd seen it. The event. The erasure. They understood what the core worlds refused to admit. This wasn't about territory. This wasn't about politics. It was about reality. The Terrans hadn't returned to conquer. They returned to redefine. And Avarice Prime was the proof. In the days that followed, everything changed. Supply networks failed. Concord-issued technology began to glitch. Codebases corrupted. It was as if the entire infrastructure was incompatible with the new presence in the galaxy. Not hacked, outdated star. Like trying to run a stone wheel on a magnetic rail. Then came the transition. Over Avarice, a second Terran ship appeared, not a warship. This one was smooth, white, elegant. It drifted slowly into orbit and deployed what looked like crystalline petals, massive, kilometers long. They unfolded into a lattice. Silent. Brilliant. Not a weapon. A beacon. It began transmitting in pulses of information so dense our systems couldn't process it. AI cores melted. Translation banks locked up. We had to rely on organic minds just to keep up. The message wasn't propaganda. It wasn't even a message in the conventional sense. It was a mirror. History. Proof. Evolution. Philosophies. Structures. Failures. Triumphs. All of it Terran. They weren't asking for surrender. They were offering assent. Some worlds embraced it immediately. Others resisted. Most hesitated, caught between fear and awe. But the direction of gravity had changed. And deep down, everyone felt it. As for me, they call me a defector now. A collaborator. A puppet. I don't argue. Let them label me whatever comforts them. I'm not loyal to a flag anymore. I'm loyal to what I saw, to what we were, and what they have become. The Concord taught me how to follow, but the Imperium taught me how to see. And now, across every dark corner of the stars, that same truth is spreading. Humanity didn't return to be recognized. They returned to be remembered. And now, they lead.